Awesome. It looks like we are on YouTube and Facebook. I am going to silence my phone so I don't get any random calls and check that we are in fact live. Perfect. Well, let's see. It looks like I can see us fine, so I'm just going to share this. All right, so if you are hopping on and can see us and hear us, give me a thumbs up. Let us know you're just as excited as I am to get this kicked off so we can get started. I know Jeff has a lot of information to share with us. Perfect. It looks like I have my board chair is hopped on here. So anyone else that starts getting on, make sure that you give us some kudos. Let us know that you're on here so I can give you love and shout outs. If you have comments or questions, please make sure that you drop them into the comment section of this broadcast so that we can bring those up and address them during our broadcast. Those of you that have tuned in before already know I'm Juliette Abdel, President and CEO of the Westminster Chamber of Commerce. And if this is your first time here, I'm especially excited to see you. So make sure that you hit that like button, the notification bell, so that you can get alerted whenever we go live. Find us on all of our platforms. We're actually streaming this video broadcast right now on YouTube. And then we're also on other social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter, at Westy Chamber. I haven't gotten into the TikTok thing, but I've been watching a lot of videos, so you never know. Many of you have been aware that for the last maybe 3 months, going on 4 now, we've been hosting these videos to help our businesses adapt to what's going on, to gain skills that they can apply to their business, or just be educated and aware from city, county, state, and federally of things that might be impacting them. When our reopening phase kind of started back into our community, then we guided the discussion with our experts on how to mitigate some risk that you might be experiencing, overcoming concerns, raising consumer confidence, and more. Now, between now and then, we feature our mayors on Monday and we close out with state electeds on Friday. So tune in with us on Friday for State Senator Rachel Zenzinger, who will be giving us a legislative recap on everything that transpired in, 2 weeks that they were actually in session after this COVID thing unfolded. So that's kind of how the structure of our video broadcasts are structured. And then we have a lot of them available for you in the video section of this page. So at any point in time, if you've missed a broadcast, if you want to share it with anyone in your network, you'll find it here on our Facebook page. You'll find it on our COVID resources page, which we've included the resource hub link for you. That's westminsterchamber.biz/COVID-19 updates. It's a long one, so make sure you just copy it and paste it into your browser. So I'm especially excited for today's broadcast. I have with me Jeff Wazin. Jeff and I met, I want to say maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. Time has flown by, but at that point, Jeff was here with us in Colorado. He was leading the Colorado Business Roundtable, and then we lost him, and our loss was really DC's gain. He is the president and CEO of Wasden Consulting up in DC, and he is involved in so many things on the federal front that we thought it would be kind of neat to at least feature him in one of our broadcasts. And I say at least because he has a wealth of information, so we might see him a couple more times if I can twist his arm. But he plans to share with us a myriad of things. So if you think of questions along the way or just hear something that's beneficial, let us know. Drop it in the section so we can have Jeff answer that for us. And with that,
it sounded really good, Juliette, to think about extended shows, but I know you're kind of hedging your bets to see how this goes in case it's a flop. We don't want to commit too early, right? It could, but if it goes well and it's of value, I'd be happy to come back on for future shows. How's that?
Thank you. And now you know why I love having Jeff with me over here. So I'm going to mute myself and give him the floor. He'll share with us some excellent content that I know will be valuable to everybody.
Well, thank you. It's great to be on. It's great to see you again, and congratulations on your ongoing successes and great work with the Westminster Chamber of Commerce. You've done an incredible job with the chamber and connecting businesses to so many incredible resources and helping them through what is an incredibly difficult time. There is no doubt there's a lot going on, and while there's certainly, a flavor of this particular show and broadcast around COVID-19 resources and help, and there's certainly a lot of things there. I would be remiss not to give a little bit of state of play and lay of the land here in DC. These are busy, busy times. I think everybody thinks there's a paralysis going on in DC and stagnation, and things don't happen. And the partisan divide is so large that we're in gridlock here. And that is actually far from the truth. The president is certainly acting on several executive orders. There's legislation passing in the House and Senate both. They don't always agree on the types of bills, and most of the time the House passes something and the Senate basically files it in the circular round file, never to be seen or see the light of day. But there is legislation being passed today. Today's also an important day on a piece of legislation that was very important to Colorado businesses, and certainly our work in the roundtable, our work with the Consulate General, Stefan Lessard, Berenice Rendon. Today is actually USMCA entry into force, which is an odd way to say that, but basically USMCA goes live today, and that piece of legislation kicks off in that trade deal with our partners in the United States, Mexico, and Canada agreement, replacing NAFTA, something that was long overdue after 25, 26 years of NAFTA. It's a very signature trade deal that I think will have a dramatic impact as far as market access. Certainly the requirements on country of origin, things like labor and environmental standards that are there, reducing red tape, electronic signatures, all those things that are there that USMCA brings to force. And so it's an important day, a day worth celebrating, a day worth congratulating so many partners and organizations that stepped up in Colorado and across this country to get USMCA passed nationally. It's a big effort, obviously, of NAM, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and the Business Roundtable nationally, and I was honored to be a part of that with so many great folks there. And so to see that start today is something that I've definitely wanted to reference and congratulate all those that were involved in that. I know prior to, unfortunately, coronavirus, and we had actually planned a big celebration that I was going to fly back for, and we were going to have to celebrate this momentous occasion in person with a big party and celebration. Which unfortunately, like everything else, has been put on hold, but I did want to reference that. I also wanted to take a second really to talk a little bit about an issue I think that we're seeing that's gripping our nation as we're dealing with this racial inequality and certainly the deaths around George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and those types of, and so many countless others that have dealt with such a challenging time. 4 years ago, Colin Kaepernick of the 49ers, my football team, if you can see a couple jerseys in the backdrop there, sorry, Broncos, gained a lot of attention by kneeling and trying to draw attention to this issue. And unfortunately, I think our response was one of looking at his disrespect, perceived disrespect toward the flag, and not really the attention of what he was trying to call attention to and raise, which is something that today we're seeing play out across countries and communities. We have got to come together and learn how to deal with this and discuss our nation's past. There are so many things that when you start to think about the opportunity gaps that face our country and people of color, from education, from childcare, you think about just poverty right now. They're 2 times more likely for a Black American child to live in poverty than a white American child. Unemployment numbers, the criminal justice system, access to quality health care, and then let alone just the challenges that they face each and every day, from simple looks to being policed, to being harassed, to being followed. And so I think it's incumbent upon our nation, our country, to have these conversations. You're seeing, I think, some very positive signs, to be honest, things that I don't think we did 4 years ago when this issue first came up. You saw Mississippi, on the stroke of a pen from the governor, change their state flag from a 126-year history that was offensive to many in this country. NASCAR banning the Confederate flags. those types of things are going to have a significant, difference as we start to grapple with this issue and really address this issue of race and race discrimination and inequality. And it's deep, and it goes a long way from education to policing. Right now, as you start to think about legislative issues going on in DC right now, some of those are around legislative issues around policing and what do we need to do and how do we deal with police reforms and uh, you know the types of things around training, community engagement, for example, data collection, transparency, accountability. What are the minimum policing standards? What should be allowed and not allowed from our police in the course of detaining potential suspects, etc. So it's an issue I think that we need to continue to stay focused on. I'm pleased to see I think a return in this country to understanding what the protests were actually about. And yes, there were some bad apples that hijacked the protests and got into looting and other things. And it's unfortunate because it does detract from the issue at hand and what really was being dealt with and talked about. And so I wanted to start off with a little bit of acknowledgement in this Black Lives Matter movement and these protests and what we're dealing with today to also call reference to that. And I'm pleased. I know so many great folks in Colorado are working on this issue. There's so many great organizations, community leaders, elected officials or not. And I think, Juliet, one of the things that you and I both adhere to is you don't need a title, you don't need a badge, you don't need to be elected to make a difference or to make positive change. And so it's great seeing that as we continue to move forward. Last night, obviously, was elections in Colorado, something I'm still paying attention to, and many friends there. It's interesting when you start to think about elections and what's happening right now. The president's having a rough time right now, and I think his records of endorsing candidates in elections and primaries is not going as well this time around. Certainly, we know that in Colorado in CD3 with Congressman Tipton, who was endorsed by the president, losing his seat. There's actually 5 sitting, I believe, at last count, sitting congressmen or women who have lost their chance to come back and represent their district. And so there's some change happening. And so, you start to look at trends in elections and where these are coming from, but it's really a mixed bag. Every time you think you understand elections and politics, you start to realize you really don't know a darn thing. Is this a Tea Party movement? Is this a move to be more conservative? Is this a more progressive socialist movement? And you look at a couple races that happened in Colorado, certainly Congressman Tipton losing his seat to a firebrand and a very conservative. But then you think about Vicki Marble, who lost her seat. You look at Justin Everett, who was trying to challenge for his seat that he gave up and running for state treasurer against Representative Colin Larson. Those two conservative firebrands both lost, right? And so you kind of start to think, well, where are we at there? Certainly you had an election with our former governor in Colorado, Hickenlooper, and Romanoff. I think most people would say the more moderate one in that race. So it was a mixed bag. It's interesting as you start to think about that nationally. There was a presidential timeout. You start to think about where President Trump gains a lot of his enthusiasm and a lot of his energy and momentum is from addressing these crowds and hosting these rallies. I think there's a lot of people that think he actually enjoys doing that more than actually running the country and governing, because he draws such energy from these rallies. But he wasn't able to do that. And then if there's a lot of people wondering where's Bernie, not where's Waldo, where's Bernie, or where's Biden? Sorry, Joe Biden, who everybody in the Democrat Party coalesced behind, has really disappeared off the radar during coronavirus, and it's interesting watching him as he tries to resurface and regain his footing in this presidential timeout. It's going to be an interesting dash to the finish line. I think you're starting to see both candidates, Joe Biden and the president, start to position themselves. I was reading a little bit earlier that the president is unhappy with Jared Kushner and some advice and some of his advisors. I think you're going to see some campaign shakeups happening within the presidential re-election campaign as he tries to regain some momentum that he's looking at doing. And so, it's interesting watching where he's at and what's happening. He's staying busy, as I mentioned. There's a lot of executive orders that he's put in place. One that I am very excited about because it's something in my work in education and workforce we focused on for quite some time, and that's really reshaping the hiring practices at the federal level. There's been an exorbitant amount of focus in our country by employers on your degree status and using that as a litmus test and an entry into the workforce by having a 4-year degree. And the president recognizes that a focus on skills and qualifications over degrees is important. And he signed that executive order. And so I think that will have a significant impact. There's organizations, companies, foundations working on this across this country, many foundations. They're spending a lot of time to try and reshape the hiring practices today. And so the president took a very big step to do that. Obviously, and as we start to think about our history and our past, certainly in the protests and things that were happening in Black Lives Matter, he also signed an executive order on monument protection, which is one that he felt was very important to protect. Part of our nation's history. I think what we need to do is come together as communities, have discussions about how we remember and celebrate and recognize and remember our past, the good and the bad. And it's important in remembering that, but also in a way that does not denigrate or put down or put a particular monument or statue that brings up bad memories and past that we need to move beyond in this country and recognize that all lives matter and that everybody has value and worth and can contribute to this country. And so that was another one. And then certainly about something the Colorado Business Roundtable, again, was a significant leader on around immigration and immigration reform. There's been some Supreme Court rulings. Supreme Court has certainly been busy. We can get into that. I know there was a ruling that just happened around case coming out of Montana and access to funding for religious schools that certainly will impact the school choice movement. But there was some executive orders on immigration and immigration reform, suspending entry on immigrants and non-immigrants that will have an impact as he tries to, again, protect the workforce in there. So getting to a little bit more after a lot of conversations around some of the lay of land where we are. We're entering right now our 14th straight week, and I want to reemphasize that our 14th straight week of having over 1 million Americans file unemployment claims. Staggering numbers. There's been a lot of resources placed on trying to help business owners and workers deal with this incredibly disruptive pandemic that we've been facing. The CARES Act, we have talked a lot about the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Security Act, nicknamed CARES. You also had the March 1, the Coronavirus Preparedness Response Supplemental Appropriations Act that really started to provide low interest loans, loan forgiveness, access to capital, payroll protection program, the PPP that many people have known and I know you've talked about on this show. But there's still work to be done. Right now, you have the $600 extra unemployment benefit bump set to expire. How are we going to deal with those types of issues as folks continue to claim unemployment in record numbers that this country hasn't seen in quite some time? Business is faced with a lot, and I think a lot of people in trying to understand impacts into the business community and what that looks like. We certainly talked about access to capital, but what is your workforce capacity and the impact of workers that are impacted by this? What is your inventory and supply chain? What kind of shortfalls are you facing because of coronavirus and its impact to your ability to continue to get those products to your storefront, to your retail places, to your customers? What about insurance? What kind of insurance impacts is this face and will continue to face? And then certainly the changing market, the demands in marketing your business, and how you reshape your ability to move forward. There's no doubt when you look at certain industries, whether it's entertainment, and you're seeing a lot of folks that are in that industry, whether it's the big Disney, Disney Worlds, Six Flags, Universal Studios, SeaWorlds, all down to Lakewood, to Elitch Gardens and others in Colorado that are having those issues and facing changes in that. The movie theater and then again in the entertainment, plays, performing arts, sporting events that are all reshaping. But you get into hospitality and lodging and retail settings, and how are they facing these changes? Do workers want to go to work today? Do they want to be faced with customers that might be bringing coronavirus into their store that they may be facing? How do we ensure the protections upon that workforce so people are continuing to be safe? We didn't even talk about the travel industry and changes to there. But certainly, as folks get on planes, they want to be safe and need to be secure. This country's itching to get back to work. This president is trying to do everything he can to get business back to work. And so you're starting to see, I think, some things around what is a last legislative fix look like, and what kind of protections and resources can we provide. Leader McConnell has made it very, very clear that there will be one more piece of legislation passed around COVID-19 to provide the kind of support and resources and help. There will be one and only one. It's easy to say that today, but right now we're all under the assumption that there will be one more additional bill passed. The House already passed one. As I mentioned, it went to the round file. It was DOA in the Senate. It had billions toward state and local governments. And I think the Senate's trying to wrestle with how much needs to go to state and local. Do they need to provide additional resources for certain sectors that have been harder? Do they provide more support to workforce and workers that have been impacted? How do they handle unemployment? Will there be a second stimulus check that's included in that legislation? And so those are some of the things that I think they're trying to deal with and grapple with in the second bill that they're going to take up hopefully before the August recess. I didn't get the infrastructure, which is one that I've been for 6+ years in my role at the Colorado Business Roundtable. We hosted Moving Colorado Forward for years, is talking about infrastructure. I think, to be honest, it was something that this president may come to realize was a regret of his in trying to tackle the Affordable Care Act right out the gate, which is such a partisan contentious issue, and not tackling something where I think you could gain widespread partisan support on both sides of the aisle, and bipartisan legislation around infrastructure that's so sorely needed in this country. The House is trying to do some work in passing things. The U.S. chambers actually said they wouldn't support the House's thing because it will not gain the kind of bipartisan support that's needed to get an infrastructure package to move forward. But one that I'm committed to, and I'm part of a couple of different coalitions here back in DC and tuning into some groups that understand the importance of infrastructure to our country. A couple other things that I'm working on. So one is Digital Us. It's a great endeavor right now in the movement to really talk about digital resiliency, or that we don't really use there, but understanding that the technological needs and advances that are happening too quick, too fast right now, and access the types of training and resources that you need move so quickly. But how do you develop a resilient workforce that will be able to adapt and adjust and deal with the changes? Certainly around workforce and pathways, I can remain committed to those particular issues, and hosting the Pathways Conference and focusing on those issues that have been so important to us, and I will continue to work on those and several others. I know one of the Colorado company called Parent is doing something called My Journey, and they've been involved in several states, actually here in Virginia, where I live now, with this My Journey program, and helping navigate the resources of the platform and develop new profiles and workers to help bring these critical resources and help workers and state governments legislate and navigate the hurdles and provide the kind of data and collection and training that's there. So much going on. That was probably the longest you've had a guest talk straight.
Okay. It was perfect.
Everybody wants to take a breath. I don't take a breath. I didn't take a drink, and I probably rolled for 20 plus minutes. And you're like, go for 10, but that's great. You got twice as much depth.
And I forgot that you look around a lot. I should have told you this is sensitive a little bit to movement. So if you can keep straight so I can hear you, because some of it was going in and out toward the end. And I wasn't sure if it was just me or not. But you had a lot of great content, and it was okay that you were not taking a breath, Steph. Quick shout outs to a couple of folks. Hello, Parker. It looks like Sheriff Rick Regenborn is on with us. Good morning to you. Larry Goodwin. I see Emmanuel, Ann Hogan, and Brian Head. So thank you all for hopping on and tuning in. I've tried to capture a couple of the comments that Jeff was making into the comment section of this broadcast. So if you're just now hopping in, you can catch up on a variety of things that he's touched on, from unemployment to COVID response, all the way to workforce and education executive orders that are out there. We touched on elections here in Colorado and even presidential elections as well. So we included a lot of those comments into this comment section of this broadcast. If you have questions or anything on the federal front or nationally that you'd like for Jeff's input on, please type it in so we can pull that up. So Jeff, I know that you touched on a variety of things. Several we overlapped on. I know USMCA was one of those that at the time you were with Colorado Business Roundtable, we were heavily plugged in and supporting that just because of our individual interest with certificates of origin and international trade and things like that. You did have one thing in here that I wanted to pick up, and this was related to workforce and education. And we talk on the president signing an executive order of really giving more weight to having skills and training and real world experience and not necessarily just looking at degrees. Can you tell me how that applies to some of the government roles that may be out there? So as you may be aware, a lot of those positions that are available in various departments federally generally ask for a combination of education, and it's not education of, trade or even a 2-year or 4-year. Sometimes it's those master's degree or even PhD coupled with experience of 10, 15, 20 years. You end up looking at it and you're like, well, should I have been in a diaper so I can apply to this if you're anyone that's between 30 and 40? And so how do you see that this executive order is going to address some of those job positions that have generally kind of excluded some people in the past? Are you still with me?
Yeah, no, I can hear you. You're doing great.
Have I stumped you with that one?
You are fading kind of in and out there a little bit, but you actually did a great job in framing that, Juliet, as you start to think about how we really address these access when you're trying to sit and hire. And I think, as I mentioned before, the private sector is doing an incredible job focusing on these particular issues. But it was great to see the public sector and the president come to grips with this and start to address really this from a federal level. It is a disqualifying issue to sit down and start to talk about years of service. Having moved to DC and started to look for jobs here, when it says that you need 10 years of experience in a certain field, how do you get that 10 years? When you've done the job for 6 years or 8 years, but don't hit the 10-year mark. What is your ability if you've got some incredible training from some great providers? And there are so many training providers that are in the private sector helping folks gain the necessary skills, but maybe don't get the degree there, but you're qualified for the job. And so I think what you're seeing right now is really an attack from the education sectors, the philanthropic, nonprofit, NGO side, but certainly the public and private sectors coming together to recognize that our hiring practices need to change. What we're focusing on needs to change. The types of skills and jobs and opportunities that are providing from these institutions need to be reshaped and refocused because the jobs of the future are changing, and the kind of skills that we're providing right now may not be relevant for the types of jobs in this new world order. We talked a little bit about the impacts of coronavirus and the changes to the market, to demand, to customers' needs, to the way businesses are reshaping. That coupled with technology changes and the technological advances that are hitting there are changing the marketplace. And are we keeping up with our education providers and providing the right kind of skills and trainings? And when you can show and prove that you have that kind of training, can you then enter the marketplace? And so you're seeing a lot of different approaches around this particular issue of addressing not only market signaling, what are employers looking for? What are we saying? The types of jobs, how do we get the relevant data to folks? How do you get the kind of training and skills? What are the types of credentials and jobs? And how do you ensure the kind of quality of those programs to make sure that when you move from an Apple to an IBM, over to an AT&T, for example, in tech space, or you're in the financial services, that those skills are permeable and portable, that they're transferable, that you're going to have the baseline level of skills and training that you need. But removing some of these hurdles on the hiring front will go a significant way. And it's, in the scheme of all of the noise that's going on and trying to cut out some of the noise, and a lot of it political, because this is an election year, and we know that, these kinds of executive actions actually have a pretty significant impact to do something that we've long sought, to put that focus again back on the training and the skills that you possess, not necessarily on the piece of paper. I kind of share this funny story and poking a little bit, and those that know me that love self-deprecating humor and poking fun. My education experience, I started at BYU. I was asked, probably politely, to not come back after 1 year at BYU. They probably thought that I wasn't a great fit there. So I went from BYU, which many know that it is a Mormon ran, but very straight-laced, to Chico State, who Chico State was listed by MTV and Playboy as the #1 party school. So you can put those two on the extreme. Not one individual ever asked what school I graduated from. It was always, do you have the piece of paper that proved that you graduated? So it wasn't a quality issue. It was whether you had it or not. And our point was, we need to put people in a point where they can prove their worth, prove their value, show their ability to get the job done, equip them with the right skills. And that's why I'm so excited about all this work and things that I get involved in, and so many folks that are helping drive these kinds of conversations to ensure the kinds of training. How do you navigate the resources? What's a good training program? Will it actually give you access into the marketplace when you go through that program, because you now have some relevant skills that employers are actually looking for in a job that will give you that kind of access? And so it's great stuff. And I know these are things that you and your chamber are really helping focus on with your businesses there in Westminster. And I applaud you and your local leadership there for continuing to understand why these things matter, why immigration policy matters, why legislative policy matters, what's happening with our education providers, what are our employers saying, how do we get our workers with the kind of skills that they need to be gaining meaningful employment, that they can contribute to their society and come home at the end of a great day's work and provide for their family and focus on being able to go enjoy a retirement and take their kids on a vacation and enjoy some things in life with those kinds of skills and training. So it's great to see, and we'll continue that focus, and certainly the work that I'm going to get involved in today, and so many others across the country are doing.
Right. Well, and it's exactly as you said, a lot of these issues, we're working on them here in Westminster. You're talking about them there in DC. It's not specific to one community, right? So this is all nationwide. This is immigration, education, workforce. These are all challenges that should be addressed and looked at holistically. We do have a comment from Brian Head that comes in. He's giving you some kudos, Jeff. He says some of the most important education is that on-hand experience on the job, not the fact that you could have been kicked out from one school to go to the next, right? So that was a good example that you gave. So we touched a little bit on this earlier when you said that there's likely going to be legislation that comes forward. There's already something that's come from the House. Senate side, they're saying that there'll be something to continue to support COVID response. How do you foresee some of these legislations or policies that have been created in combination with our economy? We're seeing articles that are saying, there could be a likelihood of our economy continuing to be closed off for an additional, 18 months or so, or expected into the spring. And when you couple that with government solutions by increased dollars and getting back and infusing it into those unemployed, or providing that cushion and support, there's going to be a long-term effect that's there. And from your lens, how do you see that already unfolding? Or if you had that crystal ball, what can you predict? Because I haven't seen anyone really come out and say, here's what the likelihood of all of this immediate action is going to have on the tail end. And as you're forming that answer for me, I want to go ahead and give a shout out to Jody. Good morning to you, and Shay. Thank you so much for hopping on.
Yeah, it's a great question, Juliet. I think that crystal ball is so hard to figure out right now, because we've got another wave coming. And I think people are struggling to figure out what this second wave looks like right now when you're seeing this reemergent in several states, with folks trying to figure out how to deal with this particular issue. You see Florida, you see Texas, you see Idaho, Arizona, Nevada, California, South Carolina, that are really seeing a reemergence in this second wave that people predicted, right? It's not a surprise. It's not a shock as you start to reopen the economy, you reopen entertainment, you reopen beaches, folks start to go back out. People are starting to travel, and you're seeing an uptick there. There are concerts that are actually happening. Wineries are open, bars are back open. And so I think folks knew that. I think what I'm really trying to pay attention to, the numbers are going up. There's no doubt. That is not a shock or surprise, but really it's more of the impact on the hospital system. There are about respirators, people intubated, and what is the unfortunate side, our death tolls look like. Those numbers are going to be more impactful on the backside. We know as more folks get tested that you're going to see an increase in numbers, but really it's trying to understand directly, are we able to continue now to function? Are folks being hospitalized at the same rates that numbers are going up? And testing is proving out that right now we are not seeing the spike in hospitalizations across the country and the death tolls that we were seeing at and the rates we were seeing earlier. So I think we're learning a lot about how to deal with coronavirus, how it's transmitted, how we treat that. I think those are positive. We've got the best and brightest minds. I do not ever doubt the American mind and ingenuity and willpower and innovative spirit. And I think as more that we can continue to listen to the experts, to watch the data, these are emotional issues, and folks that are in business that understand, that want to get back to work, that understand that they're losing business, that have bills to pay, that are facing these mounting challenges, that are trying to say, let's reopen quickly, still understand that we have a responsibility to protect their workforce, and the customers as well. And that's where the challenge, and you're trying to thread a very thin needle on reopening in a safe way, reopening in a way that allows folks to go back to work, to bring income in for their families, but at the same time not put us back in risk and have us set back, because I don't know that our country right now can handle a full dramatic second wave of shutdowns. We know how disruptive and impactful this first big wave of shutdowns. I hope that we're able to do it as we've seen this spikes in a more, I think, thoughtful manner. I think you're starting to see, I've long wondered why the certain states are now at 12, 13, 14 weeks in deciding that masks are important to wear today, when why that wasn't done 13, 14 weeks ago. Those kinds of policies and changes. And I know, the president is put in a tough position as far as does he enact nationally or federally and trying to address the kinds of things, or does he allow states to really have that state control and local governance over these particular kinds of issues related to the types of phases and reopening? Governors are handling this very differently, and you're seeing that. You're seeing reactions from some governors continuing to move forward in reopening. Virginia just moved to phase 3 today, even as numbers are going up. But I think if we're able to do so in a responsible manner that protects life, we can get people back to work. We can re-engage our economy. But most importantly, we need to and have to continue to make sure that the health and safety of our workforce, of our customers, our families, our loved ones are taken into account. So this next bill and legislation is trying to figure out what that looks like. Where do you put the kind of resources and support? What kinds of industries do you prop up? Is it more important to support folks in hospitality and lodging and in the restaurant industry? Is it important on the entertainment side? Does air travel? I know the president was looking at trying to stimulate air travel and tourism differently, right? Or do we really want to look at the stimulus package again and getting a second check to every American that helps them not only pay for critical bills, but also puts them at your local stores and shopping local and spending that money that not only helps their family by receiving that, but certainly the businesses they frequent. So it's a lot to be done. Businesses are impacted. There's no doubt when you think about how local governments get their revenue. There's shortfalls, and Colorado is no different than any other state that's facing new budget shortfalls. So I think there's a big, a question of how much is that the federal responsibility to support state and local governments? What does belt tightening look like? What are those cuts and changes that need to happen locally? What kind of support does a local mayor or a local governor of a state look to the federal government for, and what's coming? And so, I think there's a rightly so. We've been all part of Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, Fix the Debt. So many folks in Colorado and across the country trying to control or curtail our spending. These stimulus packages have been expensive, but I think people have understood the importance of why we've had to pass several of these funding bills to provide the kind of resources and help for so many folks. I think one more is probably the right answer today. That could change if we're still dealing with the impacts of COVID-19. And as you said, 10, 12 months down the road, that maybe we need to do something differently. But I think they're going to approach this last package very thoughtfully and trying to understand what did giving every American a $1,200 check look like, and what was the impact of that? Was it actually beneficial? Did it improve small businesses across this country? Did it impact folks? Were they able to pay off bills, electric, housing, water, car payments, insurance payments? How did they use that? What was the impact of that? And then, trying to deal with supporting access to capital and government and payroll protection, unemployment benefits, things that need to be wrestled with. So it's a big bill. It's going to be potentially pushing back up in the trillions again, if not hundreds of billions. And so we'll see what they end up passing.
A lot of variables. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, the variables. And when people talk about lobbyists and use that L word that many people there are a lot of folks in DC with their hands out that are advocating for their clients and for their industries, as they should. Don't get me wrong, that's part of this game. It's part of what has to happen when you're representing specific sector or industry that's been devastated or impacted. They need to be here, but there is a lot of activity and a lot of folks in the ears of our congressional leaders right now, trying to push for their particular issues or industries or sectors. And so there's a lot of noise. They're trying to cipher through a lot of things to try and understand how they can best pass this legislation that will benefit the most folks in a very thoughtful, helpful way.
Well, and if nothing else, what you shared at the very onset of answering this question was this is a second opportunity to really be thinking about how do we readdress this and address it in the best way where we're supporting our community and maintaining that health and safety element, knowing that, we won't stop things from spreading, but we don't want to exhaust our healthcare system, and we don't want to continue to push back our economy because it can't take an additional hit. We are at the peak of our time, and so I do have to close this out. If you end up watching this video, give us that hashtag replay. And if you loved what Jeff shared, let us know that you want Jeff back so I can twist his arm here with us. We will be back here again, 11 a.m. tomorrow. We will feature GQ Barbecue. They're part of our business success story and what they've done during the time of COVID, what things they've implemented in terms of precautions, health and safety, and things that you might be able to translate in your business as you're looking to reopen back up. I do want to thank each of you for taking the time to be here with us in hearing Jeff out. The content that he was sharing federally, it was a lot of information, but I knew it would be a lot of relevant information for everybody that was interested. So I do appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. And to Jeff, it's always a pleasure to see you. I miss seeing you here in Colorado, but I'm glad that we can at least connect virtually for now and keep fighting the good fight for us up there.
Thank you so much. Truly an honor to be here. It's great seeing